This is the story of the rise of the Roman Empire, the most successful civilization in history. It's going to be a wild ride through war, politics, intrigue, betrayal, and ultimately conquest. But how did this small village on the Tiber River grow into one of the greatest empires in human history? What was it about this particular group of people that made them conquerors of the known world? Legend tells of twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, raised by a she-wolf. They fled an abusive father, King Amulius, returned to their birthplace, the Palatine Hill, and found the city of Rome in 753 BCE. Romulus killed his twin in a fit of rage, and went on to become the first king of all Italy. And thus Rome was built. Now we know that isn't true. There was no great fire in the palace, no she-wolf that suckled the twins. That's just a myth, part of the propaganda campaign of the Roman kings. See, kings they were for quite a while. Rome was a monarchy from 753 to 509 BCE, some 244 years of rule. The Romans claimed that there were 7 kings, from the legendary Romulus to the last king, Tarquin the Proud, but really, we have no idea. What we do know is that after 509 BCE, Rome became a republic, which lasted nearly 500 years before collapsing into civil war. The overthrow of Tarquin the Proud and the establishment of the Roman Republic is our starting point. So let's get to it. There were 2 main ways to expand, either through diplomacy or through war. War was expensive, so you needed wealth to wage war. But if you won, you got more land, more resources, and more wealth. Early Rome was rich because they controlled the lucrative Italian trade in salt. However, other Italian states quickly taxed their own salt production and imported theirs from the Etruscans, cutting Rome out of the loop. As a result, Rome went to war with its neighbors. First up the Latins, then the Alban kings, and finally the Etruscans. Each time Rome won, adding new lands and new wealth to the Republic. In 496 BCE, the Sabines invaded Latium, so Rome called in her allies to stop them. This alliance of Latin peoples would later become known as the Latin League. After defeating the Sabines, Rome continued to add allies, conquering more and more territory across central Italy. But Rome wasn't alone. The Greeks to the south had colonized the Italian peninsula long ago and now controlled most of the coast. The Greeks weren't interested in joining the Roman sphere of influence, though. They preferred to remain independent. In 446 BCE, the Greeks went to war against Rome, but Rome was victorious. And from that point on, the Romans saw themselves as masters of Italy. Their next target was Carthage. Carthage was a Phoenician colony located in North Africa, controlling most of the western Mediterranean. Rome and Carthage were natural rivals. Both wanted control of the seas and the riches that came with it. In 264 BCE, the First Punic War began. It was brutal, with battles fought across the Mediterranean. But in the end, Rome won. The Romans even invaded Carthage, but failed to destroy it. In 218 BCE, Hannibal Barca set out to punish Rome. He led his army and his famous war elephants over the Alps into northern Italy. For years, Hannibal and his army devastated Roman territory, but eventually Rome prevailed. By 201 BCE, the Second Punic War was over, and Rome controlled all of the western Mediterranean, but there was still one more war to go. In 149 BCE, the Third Punic War broke out. This was a disaster for Carthage. Rome completely destroyed the city and enslaved or killed most of the Carthaginians. Rome was the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. Its navy was the strongest the world had ever seen. And Rome didn't stop there. The Romans sent expeditions into the Atlantic Ocean, as far as the British Isles, and even into the Baltic Sea. Rome also conquered Greece. Once they did, the floodgates opened. Greek culture poured into Rome. Roman aristocrats adopted Greek fashions, art, and architecture. And soon, much of Roman society was Hellenized. Greek was the language of scholarship and literature in Rome, and some Romans even studied in Athens. The Romans also learned about philosophy, democracy, and republicanism from the Greeks. And the Greeks learned a lot from the Romans, too. Romans were pragmatic and efficient. Roman roads connected the empire and made travel and trade easier. Roman law provided a framework for settling disputes. And Roman organization made it possible for disparate regions to cooperate. However, While the Roman Empire was growing and thriving, the Roman Republic was falling apart at the seams. Rome was prosperous. Villagers and farmers grew grain and vegetables. Artisans and merchants produced and sold goods in shops and marketplaces. Slaves did most of the work. They worked in mines, on plantations, in households, doing whatever their owners demanded. Most slaves were prisoners of war, and most were foreigners. The gap between rich and poor grew wider and wider. While the elite class, the patricians, lived lives of luxury, many poor citizens lived in extreme poverty. This social inequality led to unrest among the lower classes, and the leaders of Rome knew this could lead to instability. In the mid-2nd century BCE, Rome experienced its first serious political crisis. Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus were brothers who attempted to reform Rome. Tiberius attempted to revive the old Roman tradition of giving land to poor citizens. When he was assassinated, his brother Gaius took up the cause, but he too was killed. These events proved to the Roman elite that change was necessary. The Gracchi reforms did not succeed, but their deaths paved the way for future reforms. Marius and Sulla were generals who competed against each other throughout the 1st century BCE. They reformed the Roman army, making it professional and paying soldiers monthly salaries. This meant that, instead of serving short-term enlistments, soldiers could make careers out of the army. This policy change led to some bizarre situations, like when Sulla marched on Rome with his army, forced the assembly to name him dictator, and then left to conquer his enemies. When he returned, he executed thousands of his political opponents and placed loyalists in positions of power. Marius would later do the same thing. Civil war broke out. Marius and Sulla battled back and forth. Finally, Sulla emerged victorious. He went back on his word and did not restore the Republic. Instead, he became a tyrant. Now Rome had fallen to a dictator. But this was only the beginning. The first triumvirate was an alliance between 3 powerful generals, Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar. The second triumvirate was an alliance between Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. But those two were nothing compared to Julius Caesar. He was a brilliant general and politician who grew Rome's borders to unprecedented size. He also established colonies throughout his empire, resettling war veterans and other poor citizens on land. Caesar was wildly popular with the common people, but not with the Roman elite. They hated that he was taking away their power. After Caesar crossed the Rubicon River into Italy with an army in 49 BCE, the Roman Republic was done. Civil war was inevitable. Caesar's rivals assassinated him in 44 BCE, but his adopted son Octavian took revenge. He defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium. In 32 BCE, Octavian became the first Roman emperor, taking the title Augustus. The Roman Republic ended 500 years after its founding. The Roman Empire had begun. Rome was the center of an empire that stretched from Spain to Egypt. The Mediterranean was a Roman lake. Rome controlled the richest regions of the ancient world. Augustus's rule was a golden age. Peace and prosperity reigned throughout the empire. Trade flourished, cities grew, wealth increased. Augustus founded the dynasty of Julio-Claudian emperors. Rome became the capital of the most powerful civilization in the ancient world. And yet beneath the surface, trouble was brewing. Augustus's successors were power-hungry and cruel. Caligula, Nero, and Commodus were mad emperors who persecuted Christians. Rome had gone from a city of 1,000 to a sprawling metropolis of 1 million. People flooded into the city, straining its resources and infrastructure. However, by 180 CE, Rome was entering a new golden age under Marcus Aurelius. The Pax Romana had begun. The empire was stable, prosperous, and secure. It would last for 2 centuries. From a small city on a hill to the capital of an empire, Rome's rise was driven by military might, political innovation, and cultural adaptation. Although the Republic died in violence and civil war, its legacy lived on in law, language, and civilization itself. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more content.